Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hey,
How you doing, Tim? How you doing, Stephen?
Hi, Raj.
Hey,
Good. And you?
I am doing very good. Thank you for asking.
Good.
So, sorry, I had to put this meeting in our calendars. There was way too many comments, concerns,
Hmm.
and so I thought it would be better that we all, huddle and align on our next steps. Because 2 days from now, on the 4th, I am taking the 0.3 up to the steering committee for it to be approved for it being submitted to OCP. So Tim, by the way, I think I did see your vote that you logged in for the 0.3 spec. Is that right?
yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hello, Amos. How you doing?
Yeah,
Are you
doing good.
representing OSFF?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Roger. Yeah. I
Hello.
saw Don is also online. Yeah.
Hey, Dong. Thanks for joining. Hey, Hancock. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Hi, Raj.
Hey. So, I am going to be waiting on Intel as well. Not Allison, but Mike Kinney. And I'm hoping that one of the platform integrators would attend as well, because they are the prime benefactors. I mean, not to say that the IFVs are not the benefactors of OpenSFI, but it was the platform integrators that uh, that posed the problem statement to begin with. So I'm hoping that they could join as well. If not, then we'll have to resolve these issues offline. Dong, so are you back in the States, or are you still
Yes,
up and you're back?
I'm in the Bay Area.
All right. Good to know.
Hey, Raj.
Hey, Ian, thanks for joining. Glad you could join.
Yeah, I remembered to put it in my calendar with the updated event this week.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Yeah, the subscription is a very funny thing from an IT perspective. Uh,
Yeah,
every IT of any corporate, they will prevent you from subscribing to a calendar, which I don't understand the security part of it. I'm sure there is there are some security nuances tied to it, but it's just that I don't understand it.
yeah. The other interesting thing is it filed itself as an all-day event, which was weird. So I had to go in and manually update that.
Come again, the file?
It filed itself as an all-day event.
Yeah, so that was my bad, Ian.
Okay.
So since then I've updated that. I I figured it out. I had to get some help from Kevin Kiefer from OCP, and so he helped me ramp up on how to use the calendar.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, it's all now I'm up to speed on setting up calendar invites and all that stuff.
I just assumed it was like an email to Google Calendar event conversion issue.
I see. No. That is not what it was. If you download the ICS file now and import that, it'll be in order.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, so one of the things we were touching on at the end last week was, I think, one of the things I'm most passionate about with respect to OpenSFI, and I didn't get my word in edgewise. We were talking about the whole concept of like the Silicon ID or something like that, and
Socket.
like, yeah, and like having to have the upper stack understand it, or do we have the lower stack understand it? Like, where do we draw that
Yeah.
line of who cares about that?
Right.
And my own personal opinion is the upper stack should,
The upper
because
stack.
the idea that I had with this, and like the critical user journey I see, is that I can take the exact same upper stack code and plug in a different OpenSFI. And like, we have a pair of platforms that are the same family processor but different physical sockets.
Mhm.
And we have to build a completely custom BIOS for both. And it's because the upper and lower stack are so tightly coupled. If the upper stack could look at the sock ID, then it could know how to craft the custom SM BIOS tables, things like that, that we need to, and not care about actually getting the SOC up and running.
I see. So yeah, I think then from that perspective, Ian, what you're saying is that the business logic need to occur on both the ends, um, both upper as well as lower. Upper in the host because it has to construct SM BIOS tables and whatnot, and lower because it has to, from a silicon initialization perspective, it has to do a variety of things. So there's a lot of complex business logic to disambiguate that ID, and hence that knowledge is beneficial for the silicon initialization as well.
I
Is
don't really see it on both ends.
no?
So like, from the upper stack point of view, it doesn't make sense to me to go and tell the lower stack, the OpenSFI part, what sock to be. I want it to tell me what sock it is.
Yes. So basically, here's the thing, Ian. I mean, there are the SIPs are there are different sorts of SIPs, right? Many SIPs, and everybody would have a different nuance of and a different decomposition of the sock ID. Now, I also late on Friday, I think I did put comments. My last, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at my comment, but let me share that with you. Give me a second. Teams Outlook. There you are. Where- Okay, hopefully you can see my screen.
That is a wide screen.
Yeah, it is why I'm so sorry. On Friday, when I was working, another story, my real machine decided to crap out on me. So the display is out, my native display on the Mac, and so I have to use an external display. Um, so sorry, you'll have to bear the brunt of the wide and oh no wide and smaller, but let me see if I can, make it better for you guys to see here. Okay.
Like watching a widescreen movie.
uh, is this better?
Yeah, that's a little bit easier to see.
All right. So let me bring this up. Okay. Let me go to that part of the comment. This is not the one, not the one. SOC ID. Yeah, there you are. Okay, so here's my comment, and I'm gonna read it out verbatim. OpenSFI does not preclude a silicon provider from supporting multiple SoCs under a single SOC ID. That is what the fear was. That is what Mike's fear was. And in fact, the SOC ID construct is intentionally designed to be flexible and vendor defined. It can represent either a single SoC or an entire family of SoCs that share compatible initialization semantics. Now, what I mean by that is for one SIP vendor, it could be a socket compatible, a family of socket compatible SoCs, right? For yet another a SIP vendor, it could be just a single SoC. There probably is no concept of family of SoCs, right? So, so what I try to do in this part of the comment, I changed the narrative just a little bit to be a bit more broader. So what I proposed was, well, let me read it out first. So in practice, this means a SOC ID can be treated as a software abstraction. For instance, a SOC family with no strict hardware encoding. For clarity, we may even consider renaming the SOC ID argument to SOC family ID to better reflect its intent. As an example, SOC family ID X could include SOC A, SOC B, SOC C. So the encoding is 2000 XX, 3000 X, YY, and 4000 ZZ, right? Where X, Y, and Z represent the various SKUs. So it is further skewed. So every SOC has further SKUs. So the platform, if you might appreciate that the silicon initialization now need to know what those, what the expected ID on that platform is from a host perspective, and if that exact ID is even present, right? So if you just say, hey, I'm expecting family X, that is fine. If the silicon initialization goes ahead and reads the hardware and it decides that, okay, this 40ZZ that it read belongs to the family X, it is all okay, right? So so it passes, so it does the job of whatever the initialization stage that it was supposed to do, and comes back and says, okay, the job is done, right? So further, the SIP or the vendor can evolve this family construct over time. Like, for example, it can expand to SOC A, B, C, and further D, E, F, etc., etc. And or choose to define a new family and thus a new SOC family ID. So when initializing requirements diverge significantly, then there may be a need to update your SOC family ID. So this gives the vendor complete flexibility to balance code reuse, validation overhead, and architectural divergence over time. The key design philosophy remains the complexity and the logic to disambiguate SoC variants within a family should reside entirely within the silicon domain, not in the host firmware. Well, that is my very rigid opinion, but I'm open to like you said, you need that information to create SMBIOS tables and whatnot. That is perfectly okay. Then in that case, both the host firmware and the silicon initialization code will need to have this information. So this clean separation, blah, 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 blah. That said, I do recognize that SOC families grow. We may face new challenges around how host firmware manages corresponding input and output structure layouts, especially in scenarios with many supported SoCs. This is an important topic that we plan to explore further in 0.5 plus, which is post 0.3 timeframe after the OCP summit as part of the roadmap toward long-term convergence. Okay, so I'm still trying to understand or bottom out on all these, like the what you just mentioned, Ian, the SM bias part. That was not very apparent in the prior discussions, but now that you mentioned, I think it's a great point, and we can definitely have more conversation around that to bottom out and align from a spec perspective. Right, so maybe the answer lies on both the upper layer as well as the bottom layer. Upper layer being the host firmware, bottom layer being the silicon initialization.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I
so
just
Raj, everything you've said is I don't see any disagreement on the use of this. What I think is maybe still kind of hidden under the covers here and not being discussed is where is the namespace of SOC ID values maintained? I think if it's part of the interface, it's going to have to be maintained by the OpenSFI spec.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great point, Mike. I think that's Mike speaking, correct?
Yes.
I do recognize. Okay, good. So yes, we can absolutely, and we must make that namespace definitions. We can make it part of the specification, absolutely, and that could be an appendix, and it could be common. It could be divergent between the SOC vendors. That is still unknown at this time, but if we can converge on the namespace, great. That would be ideal, right?
Because you could think about it
we
like from like a PCI SIG perspective, it's like PCI device ID, vendor ID, right? It's like
Right,
it's
right.
the thing, the host firmware, when it says I see this ID, I know that means this input structures, these output structures, and it knows that there's that, whether it's a singleton or a family, as you're say that's the different scenarios. But when I see that single value, there's a single set of expectations about the data in and data out and how to go construct all their tables. And
Right.
so
yeah
that's why I'm with Ian on there's no reason to pass this value in. What we want is the silicon code to do all of its silicon specific actions to figure out which of the OpenSFI SoC ID values the current silicon matches.
Right.
And that's absolutely silicon specific logic within the implementation code, but it returns back to the caller, here's the SoC ID I detected.
Right.
then
Yeah.
on that, it doesn't necessarily make sense to maintain a special OpenSFI SOC ID. We've talked about this like with respect to like DIMMs and such, that SM BIOS or the way the various kernels understand what CPU it's on. Those are all existing standards we can probably leverage for this.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, so an SoC, I think that's a different scope. I think the SoC ID, there was a bunch of configuration data you have to prepare and pass in, and output structures, and we talked, I think, at the last meeting about that. There's always going to be some vendors, likely always going to be some vendor specific areas to those, and the vendor specific ones are going to be based upon not what like CPU core is inside the SoC or what memory controllers inside the SoC or the other individual IPs or subsystems within the SoC. It is the complete set of configuration data for the entire SoC and the complete set of output state for the entire SoC.
Correct. Now you're talking about from a structure perspective, right? The entire structure describes everything. Is that what you're hitting at? Describes the entire SOC, for example. Everything that you need to initialize. Or at least from a stage perspective, from a given stage perspective. Mike, did we lose you? I think maybe there may be
No,
some.
I'm here. I'm looking for Ian if he's got a comment on that, because I think you and I, Raj, are agree with that it's supposed to represent all the data that goes in and out, which is
Yeah.
at the SOC scope, not the subcomponents within the SOC.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement on that as well. I was just saying that I don't think it's wise for us to maintain another special list of SOC to something else when there are existing conversions existing in the industry that probably make more sense to leverage. That way there's a standard that we could pull from. That's
Well,
all.
we just have to make sure they don't conflict, right? As
Yep.
long as, yeah, that's the main thing. So if you're going to draw from an existing standard, obviously PCI has, or even CPU ID, right? Those are non-conflicting by convention. AMD doesn't use the same as Intel by convention,
Right.
but the PCI ID does it through a registry. So we just have to make sure they don't conflict. That there's a that we don't accidentally have Ampere or AMD choosing an Intel ID.
Yep.
Maybe then I think in one of the posts that you made, Mike, that the SOC ID should be part of the input argument, right? So maybe that SOC ID could be a structure of an industry-defined ID, like your vendor ID, device ID, and maybe some internal ID that could be could also be used in addition to the standard. But I think I think that still needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the other element is that you've got your perspective where you want to pass it in, and you've got Ian saying you'd like it as an output. So I think maybe for the 0.3 spec, you could say let's remove the SOC ID parameter, and we can further the discussion between 0.3 and 0.5 as to whether or not that's part of the input structure or part of the output structure.
Mm. The only reason I'm hesitant to remove the SOC ID, Mike, is the time. I'm very, very close, I'm just 2 days away from submitting the specification to the steering committee. So that is on the 4th. Today is what, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Yeah. So day after tomorrow is when I'm submitting the spec. We can most certainly put something in the addendum, or maybe a separate document that that talks about, hey, these are some of the open items that will need to be fleshed out post 0.3. But can we?
What's the like the drop dead cutoff date? Because I mean, if these don't sound like huge edits, they would take a little time, a couple days for us to get through these. But if we have time to kind of get it into the right state, so we're all in agreement, and those areas where need further discussion, we don't put any of the details of the things in that require further discussion.
Yeah, the problem is then I'll have to sync this up with the presentation too, and the presentation has already gone through internal, reviews and whatnot. I'll have to submit it back to them. That is going to take a while, and that is definitely going to, put a lot of back pressure on both of these documents.
Yeah, I mean, for the 0.3 spec, I think it makes sense. I'm trying to read it as I talk. But if it's mentioned as the SOC ID being both input and output, that is, I think, just fine for the 0.3 spec, and we can clarify if it is both as we get closer to like an implementable spec.
Right. But what we can say for the sock ID is, right, we can put a note at the bottom that this has a potential for it being part of the input and output structures, which is in debate, and that will be aligned and resolved post 0.3.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not pushing for any big changes on the 0.3 spec. I'm thinking as we're getting closer to 0.5 and 0.8 and such,
Right.
like as we're starting to implement it and thinking how we'll use it in the future.
Right. So, Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm okay as long as we get that note in there that's
Okay.
still under discussion.
Okay, I'll take that action and put the note both for the specification as well as in the presentation. Okay. All right. So what else do we have? Was there anything else in contention, Mike,
Yes.
that needed to be addressed?
One of them is the runtime API, and the reason is just from just keeping the APIs as simple as possible. The way I kind of like view what the type of API that we've defined here with the stages in the first one, it's really an ioctl interface, right? It's got an ID and it's got an input buffer and an output buffer, right? So that's really what your first API is, and the second API is yet again just like an ioctl. And I don't see like operating system environments have ioctl and ioctl 2, ioctl 3. There's just one ioctl interface, right? And if you need another one, you just allocate another ID and then define the input and output structures. So I don't see a reason for distinguishing this runtime concept at all. First of all, the word runtime is very confusing, but I don't see the reason why we need two APIs that both look like ioctls. I think one is sufficient, and we just need to look at managing the stage IDs for the various actions we need to perform in various input and output semantics.
So the enums of the stage ID, they could be init underscore blah 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 blah, and for the runtime functions, it could be runtime op underscore blah 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 blah.
Right,
But,
and I said I don't like the word runtime. It's very confusing when we're talking about everything that happens pre-OS, right? So but we can continue the conversation about how do we name these various operations,
Right.
whether they're stages or not, or actions or whatever that makes sense. But I don't think we need two APIs in the way it's currently written. I think you could elide the second one, the one that you're on there, section 8.2.
Okay, so let me turn around, ask Ian, Tim, what do you guys think? And yet again, like I said, I'll put a note there that this is debatable. If this could be absorbed within the initialized silicon
Yeah.
API.
Sorry, I got lost in reading some of the portions of the spec, so I didn't quite follow.
So Mike's thought process was that, how do you define runtime, right? That was what his first question was. So
Yep.
my response to that was, well, runtime is any operation that comes in after the silicon is initialized, right? So, and his response was that, well, why don't we just keep the initialized silicon API and then just introduce, additional stages within that construct and do away with the runtime, with this one, execute silicon runtime op. Now, the one thing that comes to my mind, Mike, is that pedantically, when you are performing a runtime operation, it's not a silicon initialization operation anymore. right?
Well, maybe I
So
misunderstood. Your comments were these are still a set of actions that need to be performed in order to get the silicon into its OS compatible state. So it's all still pre-OS. It's about, your init stages, but whatever other actions that you said may be just separated in time. But I'd say depending upon implementation of silicon and code, that the time may be zero, between those things. So you're seems like you're artificially mapping maybe behavior of silicon today that won't apply in the future. So that's why this whole runtime distinction doesn't make sense to me.
got it, got it. So so then how do we so are there any operations? So let me ask everybody, are there any operations that once the OS is up and running, are there any runtime operations that occur in that require the silicon code to perform a specific task once the OS is up and running? I think there is, but I still want to.
There are things that like EDK2 runtime services do.
There
But
you
by
are.
then, I think the SOC is initialized and you're just changing states of state machines and such. For
Could
a
you-
And I think
very,
that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I mean, like an off the cuff thing that does happen that I know of is, say, write to EFI variables. Well, most silicon has SPI locking mechanisms, and the runtime has to be able to interact with that.
Right.
That's not necessarily with the SOC, but it is usually SOC specific.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then, so then,
So in fact, yeah. So in fact, Roger is asking the silicon, the silicon code routine, happened from while OS running. So, but most of ETK2 based runtime service code is not silicon related. I think it's most of are from the standard, maybe from some platforms. But I think from Intel perspective, the SMI, from SSM mode, there will be so many silicon code routines there.
right. And it's not just Intel. I mean, AMD as well. We do have SMM handlers that run in when the OS is fully operational.
Yes.
There is a lot of code there, and if you have these the specific functions that are tied into SMM during runtime that get executed, then those are the operations that need to qualify for execute silicon runtime operations.
Right. So what I think is that this is an area that obviously the spec doesn't talk about at all, right? These kinds of what services does the OS need from the SoC in order for the OS to do everything. So that may be just a topic that is basically untouched at the 0.3 level, and we'll have to have some deep conversations about those for maybe the 0.5 level to make this fully implementable. I think I've heard some opinions, at least from the Intel side, that hey, anything that the OS needs should probably be abstracted through something like ACPI, but that still doesn't resolve the fact that maybe through the ACPI path, it needs to go do an SoC specific action of some kind, right? As part of processing the ACPI request. So I think that's something that is not discussed yet, and the reason why I think has to be discussed separately is because just experience with things like SMM and UEFI runtime, you have to build the images in a different way, right? And so they may even be like separate images, kind of thing, as opposed to like OpenSFI for init, maybe one type of image versus those are the tiny set of services that are needed to support those runtime actions while the operating system is running is like a completely different set of services, right? So I think we have to consider if we really need those, how do we document those in the OpenSFI spec, and how do those get delivered from the silicon vendor for use by the operating system? Right.
Yeah. So let's do this, Mike. If you're okay with it, just like the SOC ID, we can add a similar note at the end, at the bottom of execute silicon runtime op, and that this is subject to discussion post 0.3 to essentially sharpen the definition of what this API aims to address, what functionality it aims to address. And that would be addressed between 0.3 and 0.5. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that seems like a good placement you for the timeline that you have to put that in there. And I think where I got confused was I think your first response was this was still pre-OS things, and now we're bringing today into the discussion that there's some while the OS is active kind of action. So yeah, that's going to need a lot more discussion, and maybe you need to also add that to the note that there's what's clearly the init stages, that are the sequence of things that need to occur, and then there's maybe some still pre-OS set of actions, and then there may be some OS present actions, and it's those that are under discussion,
Right.
that underneath this API.
All right, fantastic. This is great. So I see the light at the end of the tunnel, Mike, for 0.3. So these are the two topics. I think there is a third one, which is a val. I moved val into an appendix, but I did see your comment that there's a lot of discussion. There is a lot of pointers at val throughout the spec. It is sprinkled throughout the spec. Can we keep it as it is, and over time we will strive to take them out of the spec by 0.8 or by 0.8.
Hey Raj, just one thing before we move out of the topic. So Mike, just one clarification. So what you are mentioning is if there is a pre-OS thing, we can still use the init silicon API with a stage, and we don't need this API. While the other aspect is if we need it while the OS is running, we could explicitly use this. Is that my understanding correct?
Yeah, we don't. Well, I would say I don't know if this API is the right one for that while the OS is running, and it may even be like, a completely different section of the document, right? Because of the requirements for calling services at OS runtime are very different than the init ones.
Completely agree.
And how you deliver the code and how it gets executed, all those things, right, are just a completely different environment.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, the one case is where the transition happens, Mike. I don't know, would that fit into the initial one is the virtual address transition, right? And the exit boot services, the last call, right? Where we update the virtual addresses instead of the physical addresses in the silicon code. I don't know if that would fall under the regular silicon init versus this.
Yeah, that's not clear, Gary, and I think that gets into like the val implementation, right? So I hope the OpenSFI maybe doesn't necessarily have to trip across as much of that, but that kind of activity may be occurring underneath the covers, right?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
it all depends on how much we want to expose of that, right? And that's the further discussion that needs to occur. We need to do a really deep technical discussion about what do we need at OS runtime, and what is the execution environment for that. And where does the OS choose to invoke that? Is it through ACPI methods only, or are there other direct callable interfaces? Because obviously the spec so far doesn't talk about any of those things.
Yeah, even the ACPI methods, like you mentioned, Mike. I mean, even that a lot of times it does result at the end with some logic being exercised in the silicon side.
Yes, right. But sometimes they are things like the historical precedents that are out there are sometimes they'll do an action that causes an SMI. Sometimes we'll like the newer methods or things like around the platform runtime mechanism, right, where ACPI can make a C call, right? we have some mechanisms in place today for some of those things. But since we're not talking about those so far at the 0.3 level, that's an open, a very important technical topic we have to address if we believe that this spec needs to provide the OS present silicon services.
Right. Agree. Okay, so if we are done with that topic, should we move to the val? All right. So, Mike, need your thoughts on val, the way it is currently. In the jotted down in the spec, I do understand it, but I'd like to know more of what's in your mind.
You're talking about just the edits in general?
Yeah.
I mean, you've moved it to the appendix, and I think that's for the main section. As far as cleanup of the rest of the document, maybe just where I think that the defining the val in the early thing, early part of the spec is great to say that there's this, we recognize that there's this transition or whatever compatibility that needs to be implemented by the silicon vendors, or by somebody, between OpenSFI and maybe some of the existing silicon initialization, implementations or specifications. So maybe just add a note there that says, for the concept of the val is not part of this specification at all, and that it's been moved to the appendix, and that the other references to it will be removed, in a future version of this spec.
Okay, and should I put that note in the appendix or somewhere else, or maybe
where the val is defined in the first chapter? You give a definition of val.
Just a note there, right?
Yeah, I think that just gives everyone a heads up that, hey, you'll see references to val, but those are going to be removed in a future version of this spec.
Got it. Where is val? There you are.
Does anybody else have an opinion on that?
Okay. All right, sounds good. Anything else then, Mike, other than these three topics?
No, that's all for me. With that some of the terminology things we can definitely deal with later. Some of the other smaller things, so that's not a big deal. So those were the three main ones.
All right, fantastic. I think we've converged to getting this. At least it sets a really good stage for all of us to look forward to adding more definition into 0.3 as we mature to 0.5. And I think it would be it is imperative that we have yet another face-to-face post 0.3 in the last quarter of this year. And so, I mean, that's just my thought. We could still continue with discussion in the OPF meetings, but I think it is important that we have a face-to-face to truly bottom out on the 0.5 and making the 0.5 spec much more mature and more definitive than what we have in 0.3. What do you guys think? Does that sound like a fine idea? Do you guys want to you still noodle on that and maybe get back, or should I get the ball rolling on a face-to-face?
So Raj, any location is the same, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know where the location would be.
Okay.
I mean, last time Intel donated their venue, and we could ask Mike and Allison for that as well. But if not, we could. I could go and talk to Michael Schill to have a separate venue. Maybe during the OCP summit. I don't know if everybody is going to be there, or at least some of the major players are going to be there. But I don't even know if we'd have enough time to talk about it, because this needs focused discussion and at least 1 or 2 days time.
Agree, Raj. Yeah, I don't know if OCP we might be able to compress it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So if there aren't any objections, I have one last request. As soon as I'm done with the modifications, I'm requesting everybody to please go ahead and add your +1s here. So I would need a +1 from 3MDeb, 9 elements. Is Chris here, Chris Walter? Okay, I'll have to work with them offline. I will put down my +1. AMI has already done it. ARM, Senthil, you're here, right? I did hear you talk. So I will need your, once I'm done with the with the modifications that we settled to today, then ByteDance, Google, HPE, he's already done that. Inside Tim, he's done that. Intel. So Mike, would you be the one, or would it be Allison? Allison is she's turned into a pumpkin for until right. So I think that
Yeah.
you, right? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I have edit capabilities on right now. I'll have to request those, I think, to do that vote, right?
Okay. All right. And then Giri, I will need your help in +1ing this one. And then MyTech and OSFF, they've already given their +1s. Okay, sounds good. So with that said, I think I feel so much more better with the light at the end of the tunnel for day after tomorrow for the submission of the spec. I will take the action items to add notes for the 3 topics in discussion today. And once they are done, I will intimate everybody here via an email that the changes have been made. And before that, I will also request Mike to proofread those sections that I make modifications to, and then I'll send an email out, broadcasted by no later than end of day today. I will broadcast it out so that people have a chance to hit the +1s on the roster, voting roster here. Okay.
So Raj, you want the review and +1 by end of today or by tomorrow?
By end of day today, please, because I need to submit it tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
This
Sounds
document.
good. Yeah, just
And
double
day
check.
after tomorrow is the presentation.
Yes, we'll do it by end of today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey Raj, it turns out I do not have approve authority within my org, so I have to work with someone on that. So you'll have to remove me as one of the approvers for this round.
I checked with what's his name, Bertrand
Yep.
Richard, and he did mention that he had a conversation with your leadership and they were okay with you putting a +1 there.
That never made it to me, so I'll check with him.
Yeah, if you can check with Bertrand, that would be awesome.
Okay, cool. But I'll let you know end of day whether or not I'll be able to.
Can you let me know sooner than that, so that if that is a possibility, I just want to leave some buffer so that for any urgent stuff. Okay. Any other questions, anybody?
No, just want to mention Ian has superpowers. He didn't know it. Yeah.
That seems to be a running thing.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for your time and audience today. And Mike, thank you for being very persistent with your comments and your position. I really do appreciate it. That is what makes the spec really, really great. And I am sure that 0.5 will be a stellar spec for everybody to review. With very definitive set of nuances from a spec perspective. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Raj. You too.
Right. Bye.